Everyone talks about the US and China as the biggest economic superpowers. The media makes it seem like they are the only ones shaping the global economy, but what if I told you there's another player, one that isn't making loud moves but smart ones? Japan. While the world is distracted by trade wars, military tensions, and debt crisis, Japan is quietly outmaneuvering both the US and China with a strategy no one is talking about. A strategy so effective that despite its so called stagnant economy, Japan continues to dominate industries, control global supply chains, and attract billions of dollars, all while staying under the radar. So, how is Japan outsmarting the world's biggest economies, and what's the secret behind its resilience? Let's dive in. When people think of the world's most powerful economies, two names always come up: the United States and China. News headlines are filled with stories about the US China trade war, economic growth battles, and financial crisis. But what about Japan? Despite being the third largest economy in the world, Japan rarely gets the same level of attention. Many assume that Japan's economy is in decline, that it has been stagnant since the 1990s, and that its massive debt is a ticking time bomb. But here's the shocking truth: Japan is quietly thriving, and it's doing it in a way that neither the US nor China can easily replicate. Let's start with the numbers. Japan's GDP stands at nearly $4.3 trillion, making it the third largest economy globally, only behind the US and China. But unlike China's aggressive manufacturing expansion or the US's financial dominance, Japan plays a calculated long game. The world sees Japan's economy as stagnant because its GDP hasn't grown as rapidly as China's or India's in recent years. But that doesn't mean Japan is failing. In reality, Japan has stabilized at a high economic level rather than chasing unsustainable growth. It's like a champion boxer who doesn't throw wild punches but instead focuses on precision and endurance. While other economies experience extreme highs and lows, Japan has created a model that keeps it competitive without unnecessary risk. One of the biggest reasons people underestimate Japan is its debt to GDP ratio, which is over 250 to 60%, one of the highest in the world. If any other country had this level of debt, it would likely face an economic crisis, but Japan, it keeps growing and profiting. How? Because unlike the US, which borrows heavily from foreign investors, Japan's debt is mostly held domestically. The government borrows from its own people and institutions, keeping the economy stable. This means that while the debt looks massive on paper, it doesn't pose the same risks as countries that rely on external debt. Think of it this way: if you borrow money from strangers, you owe them, and they control the terms. But if you borrow money from your own family, you have much more control over how and when you pay it back. That's Japan's strategy. It keeps the money flowing within its own system. Japan may not grab headlines like China or the US, but its global influence is undeniable. The world's top car brands, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, all Japanese. The semiconductor industry, Japan supplies critical materials to global tech giants. Cultural soft power, anime, gaming, fashion. Japan's exports dominate pop culture. Japan has built an economy that doesn't need hype to succeed. While the world watches the US and China clash, Japan is playing a smarter, quieter game and winning. So while the world sees Japan as a quiet player, the reality is very different. Japan isn't just surviving, it's outsmarting both the US and China with a strategy that combines industrial dominance, cultural influence, and cutting edge technology. While China pushes aggressive expansion and the US relies on financial markets, Japan is building long term economic power through three key areas: manufacturing, soft power, and innovation. Japan has always been a manufacturing powerhouse, and that hasn't changed. In fact, while China is known as the world's factory, Japan owns the blueprints for some of the most advanced technology in the world. Let's start with automobiles. Japan's car industry is still one of the strongest globally, with brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan leading the market. Toyota alone sells more cars than any other company in the world, and Japanese automakers have mastered the art of fuel efficiency, hybrid technology, and durability. Then there is semiconductors. the backbone of modern technology. While China and the US are in a heated battle over semiconductor production, Japan has positioned itself as a critical supplier of high-quality materials needed for chip manufacturing. Japanese companies like Tokyo Electron and Renesas Electronics play a crucial role in the global tech supply chain. And let's not forget robotics. Japan leads the world in industrial automation, with companies like Fanuc and SoftBank Robotics developing some of the most advanced robots used in manufacturing, healthcare, and even customer service. While other countries struggle with labor shortages, Japan is solving the problem with automation and AI-driven robotics. In short, Japan doesn't just manufacture products, it builds the technology that powers the world's biggest industries. While China spends billions trying to influence global culture, Japan does it effortlessly. Anime, gaming, fashion, and entertainment have become billion-dollar industries that keep Japan's economy thriving. The global anime industry alone is worth over $20 billion, with Japanese animation dominating streaming platforms like Netflix and Crunchyroll. Shows like Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, and One Piece bring in millions of international fans, generating huge profits from streaming, merchandise, and licensing. Then there is gaming. Japan is home to gaming giants like Nintendo, Sony, and Capcom, whose franchises Pokemon, Super Mario, Final Fantasy generate billions of dollars each year. In fact, Japan's gaming industry is so massive that even Hollywood movies are now based on Japanese games. Culturally, Japan has achieved something neither the US nor China can fully replicate: global admiration. People all over the world love Japanese culture, from fashion trends in Harajuku to Japanese cuisine like sushi and ramen. This soft power not only boosts Japan's economy but also strengthens its global influence without political conflict. Japan's biggest advantage isn't just what it produces today, it's what it's building for tomorrow. While the US and China are in a heated race for AI, automation, and quantum computing, Japan is already making groundbreaking advancements in these fields. Artificial intelligence: Japan is integrating AI into robotics, healthcare, and even city planning, making daily life more efficient. Quantum computing: companies like Toshiba and Fujitsu are investing heavily in quantum research, positioning Japan as a future leader. Automation and smart cities: from self-driving cars to AI-managed infrastructure, Japan is preparing for an ultra-efficient future. Unlike China, which focuses on mass production, and the US, which relies on tech startups, Japan develops high-quality, long-term solutions that quietly power global industries. So while the world watches China and the US clash over economic dominance, Japan is playing a different game, one based on strategic manufacturing, cultural influence, and technological leadership. And the best part, it's working. But Japan has one more trick up its sleeve: a secret economic weapon that's driving exports and tourism to record highs. And it's something that even the US and China struggle to control. While Japan's dominance in manufacturing, soft power, and technology has been shaping the global economy for decades, there is one hidden strategy that's quietly boosting Japan's wealth, and most people don't even realize it. It's the weak yen. I know you are thinking like, what are you talking about? Weak yen? Let me explain. Unlike the US dollar and China's yuan, which their governments often try to strengthen, Japan has taken the opposite approach, allowing its currency to weaken. But why? Because a weaker yen gives Japan a massive advantage in exports, foreign investment, and even tourism. Let's break it down. The Japanese yen has been steadily losing value against the US dollar and other major currencies. In the past decade, it has dropped significantly, making Japanese goods cheaper for international buyers. For example, if a Toyota car costs 3 million yen and the exchange rate is weak, that means buyers in the US or Europe pay far less in their own currency than they would if the yen were stronger. This makes Japanese products more attractive and competitive in the global market. Many believe that Japan's central bank is intentionally keeping the yen weak, using policies like ultra-low interest rates and aggressive monetary easing. While the US and Europe raise interest rates to control inflation, Japan has kept rates near zero, making its currency less attractive to foreign investors but highly beneficial for exports. And who benefits the most from this? Japan's biggest brands. A weak yen means Japanese products are more affordable worldwide, leading to a surge in exports. Take Toyota for example. It's already the biggest car manufacturer in the world, but thanks to the yen's weakness, Toyota's cars have become even more competitive in the US, Europe, and beyond. This is why Toyota has been breaking sales records despite growing competition from electric car companies like Tesla. And it's not just Toyota, Japan's entire electronics and tech industry is benefiting. Brands like Sony, Panasonic, and Nintendo have seen huge international demand because their products are now cheaper compared to American or European alternatives. Even high-end industries like Japanese whiskey, fashion, and luxury watches are booming globally. Consumers out of Japan see these products as premium yet affordable thanks to the favorable exchange rate. This strategy is something neither the US nor China can easily replicate. The US dollar is kept strong because of its global reserve currency status, and China carefully controls its currency to avoid trade penalties. Japan, on the other hand, quietly benefits from a weak yen without facing major backlash. But exports aren't the only thing thriving because of the weak yen. Tourism is booming like never before. Since Japan reopened after the pandemic, millions of tourists have flooded the country, drawn in by its unique culture, world-class cuisine, and most importantly, low travel costs. For tourists, a weak yen means cheaper hotels, food, and shopping compared to other global destinations. More spending power, foreign visitors feel like they're getting an amazing deal. Luxury experiences for less, things like high-end sushi, traditional ryokan stays, and bullet train rides become more accessible. In 2023 alone, Japan welcomed over 25 million tourists, and that number is expected to skyrocket even further. With foreigners spending billions in Japan each year, this surge in tourism is injecting massive amounts of cash into the economy, helping businesses, creating jobs, and strengthening Japan's economic stability. While other nations struggle with inflation and economic slowdowns, Japan has turned a weak yen into a powerful advantage. By keeping its currency lower, Japan is dominating exports, attracting foreign buyers, and cashing in on a global tourism boom. But the real question is, can this strategy last forever? Or is Japan walking a tightrope between economic growth and financial risk? Japan's economy might look like a debt disaster waiting to happen, but here's the surprising truth: it's not. While economists constantly warn about Japan's massive debt to GDP ratio, the country keeps growing, innovating, and avoiding economic collapse. Meanwhile, the US and China also carry massive debt, but their situations are far riskier. So, what makes Japan different? Let's break it down. Japan's debt to GDP ratio is over 250%, one of the highest in the world. If another country had this much debt, its economy would likely be in serious trouble. But Japan keeps running smoothly. How? The key reason is who owns Japan's debt. Unlike the US, which borrows heavily from China, Japan, and foreign investors, Japan's debt is mostly held by its own citizens, banks, and institutions. Over 90% of Japan's government debt is domestically owned, meaning Japan isn't dependent on foreign creditors. This makes a huge difference because Japan controls its own financial stability. If the US economy takes a hit, China can dump US bonds, causing a financial shock. Japan, it doesn't have to worry about foreign countries pulling their money overnight. In the US, debt is financed by foreign investors, and when confidence drops, markets react negatively. The government has to raise interest rates to keep investors happy, which slows economic growth and increases borrowing costs. China faces a different problem. Its debt is hidden in state-run banks, real estate bubbles, and local governments drowning in unpaid loans. If China's property sector collapses, it could create a domino effect across the entire economy. Japan, on the other hand, has a more controlled system. The Bank of Japan and domestic financial institutions hold most of the debt, and the government can keep interest rates low without triggering a crisis. Even if Japan's debt keeps rising, its economy doesn't face the same default risks as the US or China. That's why, despite decades of high debt, Japan never crashes. It simply manages its economy differently. But where is Japan using its debts? Here is where Japan's economic model is truly unique. It uses debt strategically to invest in infrastructure, technology, and innovation. Instead of borrowing to fund wars or bailouts, Japan focuses on long-term projects, high-speed rail networks, which boost economic activity, smart cities and AI-driven infrastructure, creating a tech-driven economy, research in robotics and automation, making Japan an innovation leader. Japan's government prioritizes economic stability over short-term political wins. The US and China face constant political battles over debt, leading to instability. Japan, however, takes a long-term approach, ensuring its investments actually benefit its people. So while outsiders see Japan's debt as a ticking time bomb, the reality is different. Japan's economic model is built for stability, and unlike the US or China, it doesn't rely on foreign money to stay afloat. But can this model survive forever? Or will Japan eventually have to change its approach? Japan has never been one to make loud, aggressive moves on the global stage. While China dominates headlines with its trade wars, military posturing, and political conflicts, Japan has quietly positioned itself as an indispensable economic powerhouse. Without directly confronting China, Japan is winning in key industries, controlling vital supply chains, and strengthening alliances that will shape the future of the global economy. Let's break down how Japan is outmaneuvering China without making enemies. China's rapid economic growth has triggered global backlash. The US, Europe, and even some Asian nations see China's dominance as a threat, leading to trade restrictions, sanctions, and supply chain shifts. For example, the US and EU have imposed bans on Chinese tech companies like Huawei, blocking them from Western markets. The US has restricted China's access to advanced semiconductors, crippling its AI and military tech ambitions. Western companies are moving supply chains out of China due to political risks and rising labor costs. And who benefits from all this? Japan. As global companies look for reliable alternatives to China, Japan has stepped in. Japanese manufacturers are picking up the slack, supplying key components and ensuring that global supply chains remain functional without the risks that come with Chinese suppliers. One of China's biggest economic weaknesses is its dependence on foreign semiconductors, the tiny but crucial chips that power everything from smartphones to AI to military tech. The US has cut off China's access to the most advanced chips, crippling China's ambitions in AI and high-tech manufacturing. Meanwhile, Japan has quietly become a global semiconductor giant. Japan dominates 50% of the global market in semiconductor materials, meaning even US and Taiwanese chipmakers rely on Japan for production. Companies like Tokyo Electron and Shinetsu Chemicals supply critical materials to giants like TSMC and Intel, making Japan an essential player in the chip war. The Japanese government has invested billions in revitalizing its semiconductor industry, attracting major partnerships with US and European companies. While China struggles with sanctions, Japan thrives in high-tech exports, securing its place as a trusted global supplier. Despite its economic strength, China has a trust problem. Many countries see China as a geopolitical threat, leading them to limit trade, restrict investments, and look for alternatives. Japan, on the other hand, has built strong economic and diplomatic alliances. The US and Europe trust Japan's technology sector and actively collaborate on high-tech industries. Japan has trade agreements with key markets including the EU, Southeast Asia, and India. Major companies prefer Japanese suppliers because they don't come with political risks like Chinese companies. This means that while China faces growing resistance, Japan continues to expand its influence and economic reach without direct confrontation. Japan doesn't need to challenge China head-on to win. By playing the long game, controlling key industries, and maintaining strong global partnerships, Japan is securing its future as an economic superpower, without the geopolitical baggage that China carries. But the question remains, can Japan maintain this quiet dominance, or will China eventually find a way to fight back? While the world is fixated on the US-China rivalry, an economic powerhouse is moving quietly in the shadows, and that's Japan. Unlike China, which faces trade bans, global distrust, and economic volatility, Japan has found a way to profit from the chaos without making enemies. Unlike the US, which is drowning in political conflicts over debt and inflation, Japan has created an economic system that defies traditional rules, and it's working. Japan is playing the long game, securing its place in semiconductors, automation, and cultural exports, all while maintaining strong alliances. It isn't making loud moves, but that's exactly why it's winning. But here's the big question: is Japan secretly outsmarting both the US and China? Or is this strategy a ticking time bomb waiting to explode? Let's continue the conversation. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And you know how Japan is quietly winning the economic game, but what about countries that had all the potential and still failed? Take Argentina, for example. It had everything to become a superpower, just like the US, but it failed. Why? What went wrong? Click here to find out. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.